won World War II. We were the good guys by every yardstick, and we became the world reserve currency. They had the Bretton Woods Agreement where the dollar became the currency of the planet. And slowly that began to get abused. And economists warned of it across the board and said we'll end up like Weimar Germany down the road. Mexico's done similar things. Argentina. Every country has done this basically at one time in their history, one way or another. And it always ends, sometimes a generation or two later, in disaster. And that's what economist Bill Bonner, BonnerandPartners.com, his new book, Hormageddon, is breaking down. And I want to get in to the book. I want to talk about the fact that you can go to getbillsbook1.com. He wanted to just come on and talk about the economy, but I've got the breakdown from the website on it. You can go there and get a hardback edition of the book before it's available anywhere. You can get an electronic copy. You can get a great compendium of America called The Idea of America, a full year of Bill's new publication called The Bonner Letter. And number 5, you can get a special number 1 report, Bill Bonner's Trade of the Decade. And number 6, you can get special report number 2, the Bonner Family Wealth Blueprint. And he didn't come on to do this today, but I read his stuff, so I'm plugging it for him. When you go to his website, getbillsbook1.com, you can sign up and get all of that for $49. You'll receive that. And I'm telling you, just one of the newsletters for a year, it's a value at $49. You get 6 different things all there on the website. You can sign up for that at getbillsbook1.com or BonnerandPartners.com. You can also navigate over there as well. So he joins us here today to go over all this. So, Bill, again, I want to give you the floor to really encapsulate all this for people, but take your time at the same time. I mean, if you take 20 minutes, it's encapsulating it. So you're telling the story of Weimar Germany. I think we should go back to that. And then I was asking you the question selfishly and for my audience. I know it's very technical. That's why it's in the book and in the newsletters. But just a gestalt, how have you protected yourself? What do you really think the time frame is? I know no man knows.
Nobody knows. And
all this stuff.
Because
only God knows that stuff, even the globalists with their control.
No. It might be a year out, might be 5, might be 10. You don't know. These things tend to last longer than you expect. But I think anybody would be foolish not to be protected now, because you never know. This thing could, we're seeing some sell-off in the market now. We're seeing a lot of skittishness. We're seeing, those Russian troops at the border. Who knows? You never know. So you got to be prepared. And the preparation this time, I think, should be better than ever, because, the last time we've had a serious problem in the country, in the United States of America, was during the 30s. And the 30s was the Great Depression, of course, everybody knows. But during the 30s, people could still get by because a quarter of the country still lived on the farm. And those people who didn't live on the farm hadn't been off the farm for very long. And the society did not depend on being able to go up to an ATM machine, put in a plastic card, and get something come out of that machine that was worth something that you could buy something with.
Bingo.
Now, all that stuff, this is something I don't think anybody really understands. But the more complex, the more sophisticated a society becomes, the less it can afford to have this kind of central planning meddling in the economy.
The easier the breakdown. The easier the breakdown.
Screw it up.
Yeah.
They're going to screw it up, and we're seeing this major mess that they've made, which yet has not been revealed, and most people don't even know what's going on. But they've driven up the amount of credit in society to $50 trillion. And if credit had remained as the same percentage of GDP as it had been for the last 50 years, today we'd only have about $33 trillion worth of credit. And so that $33 trillion that's the money that people have spent over the last 40 years, and mostly over the last 10 or 20 years.
Well, how does the increased credit?
Sure.
How does the increased credit, and then I want you to continue, end up wrecking society? Because before they did all this fake credit, this country had 10% growth rates for the first 140 years or so of its existence. And then once all the Federal Reserve meddling got involved in 1913, they took regional problems and regional runs and, companies that were frauds going belly up, and they just expanded it and wrote it large.
Oh, that's exactly right. Before, companies would go broke, whole banks would go belly up, things would happen, and they would have crises in the economy. And in 1921, for example, there was a crisis, and stocks fell, and they fell, I think they fell down about 30%, and there was a depression. 1 out of 10 people was thrown out of work in 1920. But that depression was over in 18 months. 18 months later, there was full employment. How did that happen? Well, it happened because the meddlers were not in office, and they weren't meddling with the economy and preventing the process of healing. In order for an economy to heal, things have to fall down to the level where people want to buy them, and they buy them, and then they start investing again, and the thing gets going again. I mean, that's no mystery. That's been going on for a long time. But now we have a system where it's entirely different. And that system, by the way, had to work that way because they did not have an unlimited amount of money to save industries, to save investments, to save people. They couldn't. There was no Fannie Mae back then, and they didn't have the money to save it if it got into trouble.
Bill, I want you to continue. This is so important, but just me personally, I mean, and my family and everybody else that I know is that somewhat successful or understands economics are totally freaked out. Governments are digging in, buying armored vehicles and weapons, and the Pentagon admits they believe we're going to have a collapse down the road. So what you're saying in the thinking public is prima facie, known to be true, and you and others predicted it before it was, popularly known. What I'm asking you is, it's so scary when you talk about 90% of people were somewhat self-sufficient and rural in the 10-year Great Depression, and we had millions of people homeless and millions that starved and deaths and all the rest of it. It was a disaster. Now we have 90% urban, 10% rural. Half the rural people, it's estimated, even by the Department of Defense, are self-sufficient. My God, if we have a breakdown now of a complex system like this with meddlers, it could turn into a road warrior meets the road meets Armageddon. Is that what Hormageddon is?
That's what it's about. It describes what happens when things really go bad, and they really go bad in a collective way when the central planners get to work and stick at it. And that was what I was telling you about the German example. That was really what was going on, was Adolf Hitler was an economist who had a plan for Germany's future and how to make it better, and he stuck with that plan until the country was absolutely destroyed. There was hardly a factory working in Germany in 1945. The whole country was flattened. It was invaded, half occupied by the Allies, half occupied by the Russians, and it was an absolute, total disaster, a catastrophe. The same thing had happened, with the previous invasion of Russia, led by Napoleon, in which he went in with 300,000 troops and came back with 10,000 troops. I mean, these are disasters on a massive scale. And what we're looking at now is the same caliber of disaster in finance and economics, something that has never happened before in the history of the world, and is happening now because the leaders of the biggest economy, the most influential monetary power on the planet, have been doing something for the last 50 years, which is fundamentally very, very stupid. And we and our children are going to reap the results of that, which is going to be one of these Armageddon-type catastrophes where everything goes wrong. Everything. You go to the ATM machine, it won't work. There won't be enough cash. What happens in this hyperinflation is the printing presses can't run fast enough. You can't get enough cash to make it work. And I'm indebted to Gary North, who pointed out a lot of this stuff back in the year 2000 when he was talking about the Y2K disaster. We didn't have a Y2K disaster, but he had delved into it, and he figured out how much we are now dependent on computerized information systems. And that was in the year 2000. Now it's 2014, and we're much more dependent. Everybody. You want to get a cab, you got to get on your portable computer. I mean, it's really funny in some ways, but it's absolutely true that people can't live for more than a couple days. These systems of communication, of delivery, logistics, and all that break down, and they all, by the way, they all run on money. And the money system breaks down, everything breaks down. That's exactly what happened in Germany in the Weimar Republic. It's what happened recently in Zimbabwe. But those were relatively primitive societies. Even Weimar Germany is very civilized, of course, but people lived on farms. Like 90% of the people lived on farms. We don't have that situation in America. We depend on systems that work. We depend on money that works. And to put this money out there, to encourage this kind of crazy system where you think you can improve the economy by printing more of it, it's just criminal.
Well, Bill, I understand that,
but disaster of a biblical proportion.
Well, let's talk about what that disaster could look like and what could precipitate it. I mean, we already see sanctions on Russia hurting Russia, the EU, and the U.S., and the stock market going down because of it. I mean, it seems the meddling could actually accelerate this demise, A. B, is there a way to turn this around or have a soft landing?
Well, I'll answer B first. The answer is no, because that's the nature of Armageddon. And Armageddon starts up, there's no stopping it. And there's no stopping it because it gets everybody behind it, everybody lined up. And now you can see everybody who gets anything from the government is in favor of getting more from the government. They now control the government. There are more people who get something from the government who pay taxes. That's not going to change. And so you're going to see more and more demand. And besides that, these economists running the Fed, they've all built their careers, their reputations. They get these Nobel Prizes, for Pete's sakes. And they get it for an idea about controlling a society and controlling its economy, which is fundamentally false. And these people are not going to back up. They're not going to say, oh, guess what, I was wrong. No, they're not going to do that at all. And so let me get to the part A. Here's what's going to happen. And this is going to start happening pretty soon because we're running out of this. They're winding down this QE program. And as they wind it down, they're going to find stocks begin to fall. We're already seeing that. And when we get some bad indicators, like a stock market falls off 1,000 points, or we could come up with a bad reading of revised figures for GDP, who knows? Or it could be a geopolitical thing, like a Russian invasion of Ukraine, who knows? But something will happen, stocks will fall, the economy all of a sudden will look rotten, and what will Janet Yellen and company do? They won't have any choice about it. All their training, all their experience, everything they believe will tell them, well, they've just got to go back and do more of what they were doing before. That means more money printing. They're probably more direct money printing, probably more direct financing of federal government expenses, and probably putting more liquidity directly into the system. And for a while, that could have results once again, that look favorable. We could see a big boost in the stock market. We could see headlines saying, well, they saved the world again. And then we're off to the races again with another big run-up, another big bubble blowing up. But fundamentally, you can't build success by printing money. If you could, why, Zimbabwe would be the richest country on earth. They printed zillions of it. But you can't do it. It doesn't work that way. You got to save money. You got to invest. It's a long, hard process. That's how you get real prosperity.
Well, look at most third world countries. Many of them were prosperous previously until they went through the money printing hyperinflation situation, and then they never come back from it. That's what's so scary, is that the governments actually use the crisis to get full control and then never let the society come out of it. And that's my point, Bill Bonner.
I think that's another. I haven't even gotten into that, but just on the money side of it, when the money starts, Janet Yellen prints more money, things look good. Then they start to look bad because it fundamentally doesn't work. And then they print more money. And now pretty soon they cannot stop this. And they interviewed the guy, his name was Gideon Gono, who ran the Bank of Zimbabwe. And they said, well, why did you do that? That was crazy. And he explained how at every step of the way he didn't have a choice. He had bankers, industrialists, had the president of the country all coming in and saying, we need more money because people are running out of it. Babies are crying. And, who knows? But that's exactly what's going to happen.
Well, it's the same thing with the open border and giving free welfare to tens of millions of people pouring in. They go, it's children. Love them. They're our children. And I go, wait a minute. They can't take care of them in Guatemala or in Zimbabwe. How am I supposed to take care of them when we're already on paper bankrupt? And they go, you just don't like children. And I go, okay, well, Zimbabwe will take my kids then? I mean, it's crazy how it's all just emotional garbage, and that's supposed to trump cold, hard, economic, 100% scientific fact, incontrovertible. And then here's the worst part, Bill, and I want your take on this. It's all over the news year to year. All the top billionaires have left Israel. top billionaires are leaving the U.S., buying armored redoubts in the Cook Islands and the middle of nowhere in Australia and New Zealand and the Caribbean. Governments are digging in, saying they see total collapse by 2020 and martial law worldwide and war on the streets, and the Army's training for, zombie apocalypse, using zombie cover for mowing down crowds of people. I mean, government's digging in. They admit they know this is coming. And, I mean, I'm literally saying, what do I need to do?
Well, I mean, what you need to do, I think, is the same thing that Gary North recommended 14 years ago. He said, look, when these complicated, sophisticated systems break down, you need to be in a place and you need to have the stuff that you need to survive without them. And his idea then, which is still a good idea, is he said, look, to save your money, buy a farm in the Ozarks. you got to be somewhere where you're not dependent upon the shelves of the local 7-Eleven, because there are going to be a lot of people going after those shelves. So you got to make sure you have some shelves of your own, and they got to be somewhere where everybody else isn't going to get to them. Now I know that sounds apocalyptic, and some of my neighbors think, gee, that's kind of nutty and crazy, but I don't think it is at all.
Hey. You're not nutty at all, Bill.
When the crisis comes, you need to have some security. And security means you have to have the things that the complicated systems can't provide. And they won't be able to provide necessarily food, water, or money. And so you need to have real money, gold and silver coins. You need to have real food, either in form of a garden, something you produce, cows on the hoof, whatever you need, or in storage. And you need to have a source of water that you can depend on. Those are really the basics.
Bill, stay there. We got to go to break. Bill Bonner's our guest. The new book coming out, it's a mushroom cloud with a clown, forming a clown, Hormageddon, how too much of a good thing leads to disaster, Bill Bonner. But what he's saying is absolutely on target about being prepared, ladies and gentlemen. And again, government is doing it. If there was a 10% chance that this was going to happen, we should all be prepared. It's like 95. I mean, the only question is, how bad is it going to be? When's it going to happen? Sometimes we end up having themed shows almost by accident, just because I'll say, I want to get Bill Bonner on. I want the author of this book on. I read his newsletter. Or I'll say, the Ebola outbreak is a great example of what could happen during a crisis. Let's get the expert on it, who's the best-selling author of The Secure Home, Strategic Relocation, Joel Skousen. He's on with us in the next hour. We'll open the phones up for him in the second half for your questions on this live Thursday edition. But I didn't even mean to have the two guys together today. That's just how the producers did it, and it works out perfectly because I'm not gloom and doom. I'm somebody that wants to be successful even in a global crisis. I want to stop the global crisis, but if I can't stop the global crisis, I'm going to be positioned to be more successful. And that's what Bill writes about, and he's got a great track record in his newsletter and his books, is, hey, decry the bad stuff that's happening, try to change it. If you can't change all of it or part of it, ways to profit from it morally. Still being moral. Ways to protect yourself. And you can get his book at getbillsbook1.com, and you can get a discount on it out of the gates, basically. You can find out more at getbillsbook1.com. Again, I'm your host, Alex Jones. We're going to go back to him for some final comments here in a moment, maybe even do 5 more minutes into the next hour before our next guest gets on so we can finish up. But this hour is brought to you by Infidel Body Armor, InfidelBodyArmor.com. Again, Infidel Body Armor is owned by a U.S. Air Force veteran outside Dallas. It's where they manufacture it. We've been promoting it for 3 years. It is a bestseller. Police and military are buying it. It's better than the chromatic, ceramic type stuff, and it takes more bullets. Check it out, InfidelBodyArmor.com or 888-608-6605. They got some great videos and more there. All sizes, a lot of Molly pouches, a lot of other really great tack gear produced by combat veterans. So InfidelBodyArmor.com. Let's go back to our guest here, Bill Bonner. Bill, finishing up in the minutes we've got on points you haven't gotten to.
I wanted to point out is that there are times to make money and there are times not to lose it. And when you get into a real crisis, and a real crisis is a time when the winner is the one who loses least. And if the crisis is the kind of crisis that I think is coming, then losing least is going to mean you're just kind of holding on to what you've got as best as you can. and that probably means making sure your family is safe and sound during the crisis. So I think the number one thing is start there, and for everybody, should have a plan B and a place to go and things to eat and water to drink, and then you can start thinking about your financial situation. And what I'm doing is very simple. I want things that are solid. I don't trust these latest technological stocks and things. I don't know them, and I'm sure people make a lot of money on them. It's good for them. But as far as preserving my family's wealth and making money, I'm going to stick to things that really seem solid to me. And what seems solid to me right now is some real estate. Apartment buildings still seem pretty good, apartment deals. There are some stocks, mostly outside of the U.S., which are still good buys. And they're not too much more. I mean, things, when you get a real bubble, and you get a real bubble when you get a lot of credit and excess credit in the society, everything gets out of price.
And that's what the elites are doing. They're buying farms. They're buying redoubts. They're buying real estate. They're buying gold and silver, and they're getting bodyguards, and they're buying guns.
Yes, I think that's about right. And you can hope that I don't know, that's really a good hope, but you can think that the thing will go on a lot longer, and you can take advantage of it. Well, for all I know, the U.S. stock market could go up another 20%, maybe 50%. They get pumped.
Sir, I know you got to go, but can you do 5 more minutes with us?
Yeah, pardon me?
Can you do 5 more minutes with us?
Sure.
Okay, 1 minute break. Coming back, I want you to be able to finish up. That's so important, folks. This is so real. And I get mad at myself. I haven't gotten ready like I should. I mean, we're just putting it off, and all the signs are there. Final segment with Bill Bonner, best-selling author, researcher, economist. Get Bill's book, thenumber1.com, if you want to be the first to get Hormageddon, How Much of a Good Thing Leads to Disaster. We're going to continue this discussion coming up after the break with Joel Skousen, looking at Ebola and more. But, sir, look, I mean, it's government perspectives, analysis, you name it. You'd write about this decades ago. Ron Paul would talk about it, as I said. And people, oh, yeah, whatever, you're crazy. Now it's here, or it's around the corner. I mean, it's getting close. No one can be in denial about this. Foreign governments are openly talking about it. Is there a way to have a soft landing, or is there any other points you think you should relay to people out there? Because I just don't know what all these masses of people, 100 million Americans on welfare, are going to do when things collapse. I mean, it just sounds like a science fiction time bomb.
Well, it's Armageddon. That's what it is. And it's what happens when you get too much of what was essentially a good thing. A little bit of government's good. A lot of it's disastrous. A little bit of credit's good. A lot of it's disastrous. A little bit of sugar's good, but you eat too much of it, and pretty soon you got the shakes.
Yeah.
So, it's the same thing, and we're seeing a little bit of money, a little bit of credit, good, but you put in too much, and you're going to have a disaster. And the story of the last half of the century, and the story of our time, the biggest story of our time, is this huge, huge run-up in credit caused by the change in the money system. And that we're going to see play out in our lives in the next 5, 10 years or so. I don't know exactly. But that is a story where it's not going to be very pretty. It's going to be very exciting. And I think everybody has to first protect themselves and then figure out, how they're going to live through it, what kind of business they're going to be in, what kind of jobs, what kind of careers. And a lot of things are going to go away because there's just not going to be enough money for it. We've seen our society now is supported on credit. When that credit goes down, and it always does, because credit goes through a cycle, just like everything else. It goes up and then it goes down. And when it goes down, a lot of people who are depending on it are not going to be very happy. And those people, you talk about the 100 billion people, getting welfare benefits, disability, and so on. Those people are going to be in a tough position, and they're not going to be too polite, I would guess. So, you have to be prepared.
Absolutely. Here's my final question to you in the 3 minutes we've got left. You see them collapsing the border, wanting the unskilled people here. Cloward and Piven, we know, is a Democrat plan to collapse the economy, to politically enslave us and use the crisis to gain total totalitarian control. And we see Cloward and Piven use in other countries, Agenda 21. I mean, I understand they're mismanagers and out of control, but it's easy to burn a house down if you're getting the insurance. I see that as the mafia tactic, or in the back of the minds of the elite that are at least rationalizing that they've got some type of plan here. What is your take in closing on how it seems they're doing everything they can to exacerbate the collapse?
Well, I don't think they intend to exacerbate the collapse. I mean, they intend to hold on to what they've got. And what they've got is a system that's inherently corrupt, where they live on this money. The government created something like $10 trillion in this crisis in terms of guarantees and money printing and so on. I didn't get any of that money, but some people did, and those people are very, very eager to hold on to it. Some of them got little bits and pieces, like all those people who got disability, and some of them got lots of it, like the bankers. And all those people want the thing to continue, and there are now, as I said, there are people, you could take a popular vote, and those people win. So, that's not going to change. It's not that the elite, I don't think the elite consciously wants to see the system collapse so they can get more power. It's just the way it works. They naturally get more power as the system collapses because then they have more to work with. And they do. You can expect, just like every other time, the government to take more and more power and the chief executive to assume more power. And people will be fed up with Congress because they think Congress is not doing anything, which it isn't.
So either way, it is what it is. We're in deep crap. People need to research, need to read the book to find out from an expert on some good ideas and listen to other experts as well. Bill Bonner, I hope you'll come back again. This has been one of the most amazing interviews ever. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It was my pleasure.